I'm Alex of All Trades, and this is the Sunday Book Circle for Normal People by Sally Rooney, and the First Blush for Normal People, the Hulu original TV show. I decided to combine these two because they cover the same narrative. Normal People was next on my book list to review, and I was bored and bumming around Hulu for something to watch when I spotted the show. Let me just tell you this so far, it did not alleviate my boredom. But let's talk the novel first. Normal People takes place in Ireland and follows two people, Marianne and Connell, from their final year of high school through several years at college. They have a complicated relationship with starts and stops, weird rules of affection, strange power dynamics, and lots of sex. For the life of me, I cannot remember Connell's name. Whenever I think of this narrative, his name morphs into Colin or Colum, both of which are wrong, so I have to constantly check myself. Even if I just read it, I'll have forgotten it like 2 seconds later. It just won't stick. But that's just this weird thing that kept happening and preventing me from thinking straight whenever I tried to ruminate on the novel or show. I also don't buy the premise that a guy has the opportunity to start having sex with a girl that is obviously attractive, but wouldn't be okay with people knowing he's with her. If anything, the saltier she is, the more likely he is to tell his friends, or at least humble brag. Oh, you know that chick who hates everybody? Well, we're together now. Before I read this novel, I was told that Sally Rooney was the voice of her generation. This is not an endorsement in my mind. To me, this is setting an author up for failure. It's such a big statement. It gives anything that author writes so much more expectation, higher expectations. Normal People didn't really live up to that, unfortunately. So I've mentioned that without more serious stuff going on in fiction, that all literary books boil down to people talking or not talking, basically talking around a subject, in rooms. Normal People fits that description like 90% of the time. The dialogue and plot are very sedate. There's no real telling why this particular conversation happened on the page and that one took place in white space. There's no real reason for the time breaks that set up the structure of the novel either. Because again, stuff still happens between those breaks and people still talk about them on the page. So I question why we skipped over them in the first place if the characters were going to talk about the events anyway. In fact, by the end of the book, it's kind of just like any other previous end of the time period because rather than the plot climbing a mountain, it was more like a gentle sloping hill. It almost feels like we didn't get to the other side either, like we got to the top, turned around, and went back down the way we came. That is probably somewhat uncharitable, and I'm okay with a book not being a thriller, and instead covering interesting themes, but a plotting plot isn't Normal People's only problem. Before I get into its other problems, I'd rather talk about what it does right. The coolest thing about Normal People is its examination of power dynamics. Connell is popular in school and Marianne is unpopular, so socially among their peers, he has the power. Marianne is rich and Connell is poor, so financially she has the power. She's smarter, so intellectually she has the power. In college, their popularity flips. She's popular but has less control over her romantic life, and Connell's social anxiety paralyzes him. That's all crazy interesting and great because the idea that Connell as a male would always have more power than Marianne or that Marianne as rich would always have more power than Connell just isn't true. Who has power in a situation is very complex in the real world. It's not an easy genital or financial check or whatever to figure out who has power, and why someone doesn't have power can be very surprising. I love that Normal People does this, but it could be rather overt with it. It was very obvious at times that the scene was trying to show a power dynamic, so that the power dynamics could be discussed in a classroom or a book club. It isn't that I didn't want the power dynamics to be toyed with, it's that it needed a little more finesse to make the power dynamics less obvious. I love that Rooney handled the power dynamics and their shifts, just not how they were always written. Some of the power shifts were sticky and awful though, and for a very social reason, which I will now get into in the spoiler section. Skip ahead to get my overall thoughts. Marianne's brother is abusive, and her father was abusive of their mother, which in and of itself is a fine plot and character element for Marianne. The problem comes when Marianne starts getting into supposed BDSM as a young woman. She doesn't really want to be hit or tied up, but she's the one that requests it of her boyfriends. Jamie, the boyfriend that punches her while they have sex, is such a flat character, a complete asshole by everything that comes out of his mouth and everything he does. This characterization is awful. Well, yes, in the real world, there are people who are such complete assholes with no redeeming qualities. But a constructed narrative kind of needs to have everyone have more than one dimension. The scene that really bothers me, though, is with Marianne's foreign boyfriend, Lucas, who ties her up. He says he loves her, and this freaks her out. She literally thinks to herself, could he really do the gruesome things he does to her and believe at the same time that he's acting out of love? Is the world such an evil place that love should be indistinguishable from the basest and most abusive forms of violence? I want to make this perfectly clear. BDSM is not abuse. The practitioners of it are not abusive or abused. They have not necessarily experienced abuse as children or in other relationships, nor have their parents or parental figures. Those who take part in masochism and submission do so willingly and enjoy it. Many of them are switches, meaning they are sometimes the one doling out the pain or punishment. There is nothing wrong with this practice as long as anyone taking part is doing so consensually. The submissives often have a safe word that allows their partner to know their limits, and consent is more emphasized among BDSM practitioners than it is among the general population. There is an erroneous idea that BDSM is inherently misogynistic, but since so many DOMs are women, and many BDSM relationships are queer, and most are long-term and loving, this decree makes no sense and comes from a place of ignorance. I also believe this depiction promotes misandry, as too many women who know nothing about BDSM assume incorrectly that it is an excuse for a man to hurt a woman. BDSM is not just about sexual gratification for all partners involved. It is also about trust. It isn't something people should just do with just anyone, like a one-night stand, because no one should trust people that easily. Marianne being both an abuse victim and the instigator of her BDSM sexual acts is a very narrow and archaic understanding of BDSM. Love doesn't have to look the same way for everyone. It doesn't follow rules. What people enjoy doing sexually is not ours to judge. If it is consensual, it's none of our business. I also question that Marianne never uses the internet to understand what's going on in her sex life. There are huge BDSM communities online. All this situation in Normal People does is promote a myopic and wrong-headed view of a much misunderstood and varied group of people. It invalidates the agency of any women who enjoy this sexually and casts them as being emotionally damaged. It also further casts men who enjoy this as villains. This is unacceptable. All that had to be done to fix it was for Marianne to find a new friend, maybe online, who was into BDSM, and told her that how she went about it wasn't healthy. That's it! And I'm not the only one who has a problem with this depiction of a BDSM relationship. Due to the very serious problems of the social context I've gone over in the spoiler section, I cannot recommend Normal People. I do not recommend narratives of any kind that depict lesser-known social groups with ignorance and then judge them. I cannot support narratives when they promote toxic relationships or toxic depictions of a demographic. I don't mean to get upset when I talk about Normal People, but it is too egregious with its social themes. I know a lot of people would disagree with me. I know that especially a lot of women would disagree with me. But I find Rooney's depiction of Marianne's relationships and why they function the way they do to be irresponsible. How we represent things is important in our writing, and when a story decides to take such a narrow view of a group of people based on ignorance and possible personal revulsion, I cannot support it. We can write about the problems within a group, but we have to handle it responsibly, and that includes examining our biases, separating our own opinions from the group itself, and researching. Above all, we have to research. Research is the most important part of writing, especially when we are writing about a group of people with whom we do not belong. But let's see if the show did any better. The first episode doesn't even get to the point where Connell and Marianne are screwing. Doesn't even get that far. And I'm sorry, but any girl who's attractive enough that a guy is excited to screw her and is even considered pretty once she's in college, has some friends, and has some guys sniffing around. Look at this woman. I don't care how salty she is. She's got friends. She's got guys after her. No way in hell she doesn't. And this guy, I kept getting distracted whenever they showed him, partly from the extremely long pauses between the scraps of dialogue, but also partly because I couldn't help thinking his face looked like the side of a cliff. Then I realized, no, that's uncharitable. He actually looks like a Greek bust. That sounds reasonably complimentary, right? In Marianne's bedroom is a framed picture from a free picture website, one I've literally used in videos. Why would she have this photo in her bedroom? Why framed? Is there a story they're going to put into the show about it? I've used it often when talking about emotional pain, and it foreshadows Marianne's own emotional pain in her life. But why the fuck is it framed on her wall? If it was in a notebook she kept, I would have bought it. But on her wall? That's just lame. For only being half an hour long, the show sure wastes a shit ton of time on those quiet moments. Do not watch this if you've had an exhausting day or late at night. If you're interested, drink like 3 cups of coffee and smoke some crack. Maybe then you'll be able to focus on it for the full 30 minutes. I was completely unsure by the end of the episode how it could possibly get people to watch more because it doesn't end on an interesting note. But then, after the credits, Hulu played a trailer for the rest of the show, which means they have to know that the episode is so uninteresting that they better play a trailer for the rest of the season to entice people to stick around. The real question is if it will show any of the many instances of sex. The book mostly shied away from showing the sex scenes, and if you've seen my other book reviews, you know how I feel about that. So I don't hold out for the live action version to show any. The show also has a sequence with Connell's rugby match with Marianne in the stands, which I very much don't remember from the book. But that could be because it was something that happened off the page. Seeing her there, I questioned that she would go at all. She'd be picked on while there. That much is obvious. But she was left alone. I believe she would have been pressed by the girls at least to find out why she went. I will say that this could be a cultural difference here that I'm not getting. The part with the two of them on the bus was just awkward. First of all, his BO had to be bad. And then to not talk at all, and they're not reading or texting either. I actually got secondhand social anxiety just from watching them. If that is the point, then kudos, you did it. Not that I want to experience it again. At the end of that trailer, the title card comes up and I shouted at my TV, "Normal people marry and settle down. They don't on again, off again with their high school SO. Or they get a bunch of cats and wait to die alone so their body can provide sustenance for said cats." Yes, I was alone when I watched this, why do you ask? Anyway, if I didn't like the book, I'm not surprised I didn't like the first episode of the show. I'm not sure what people see in Sally Rooney based on this one book, so please, recommend something else of hers you'd think I'd like better, because Normal People ain't it. But what did you think of Normal People, book or show? Did you love it? Hate it? Did you find Rooney's ignorance and judgment as repugnant as I did? Let me know in the comments below, and please mark all spoilers. Is the world such an evil place that love should be I can't say this word. Indistinguishable. That love should be fuck. What the fuck? Alex. Indistinguishable. That love should be indistinguishable. Fuck. Would you like to see what I'm currently reading? Follow me on goodreads.com/outsfalltrades to see what I'm reading right now and what book reviews you can expect in the future. I've made a Discord. I'm on it all the time and you're all invited to chat with me. There are channels for video games, movies, TV shows, books, and writing. Even a place for you to promote your own things. Join me there. Everyone is welcome. Merch. Yeah. Check out my new shop at cafepress.com/outsofalltrades for all kinds of products with my face on them.